Montana Territory, August 1883. The wind carried the scent of pine and gunpowder as Kenzie Traylor gripped the reins tighter and kicked her horse harder across the ridge. Her black skirts flared behind her, and her heart pounded louder than the hoofbeats beneath her. She had sworn never to turn back to that place, but she had also sworn to protect her children. And now they were gone, taken. "Hold on, Naomi," she whispered, eyes stinging. "Hold on, Nathan." Her two children, barely 8 and 10, snatched from her wagon by a pair of outlaws while she had stepped off to refill the canteen. She had heard the yelling, the horses, seen the dust rising as they disappeared. Her rifle jammed. Her voice cracked. They were gone before she could scream their names. That was 2 days ago. She had not stopped riding since. The trail had led her north, toward the Bitterroot Mountains and straight into a narrow pass where the sun barely touched the ground. She was almost out of water, her horse limping, her hands blistered from holding the reins without rest. But she was not stopping. Not now. Not ever. She rounded a bend and then a shot cracked the air. Her horse reared. She hit the dirt hard, her breath knocked out and her elbow screaming in pain. Before she could scramble to her knees, a voice came through the trees. "Do not move." Kenzie froze. A tall figure stepped out from behind a pine, rifle aimed steady, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. His coat was worn but clean, the edge of a red bandana visible at his throat. He looked like he belonged here, like the mountains had carved him. "Who are you?" she asked, breathless, fingers twitching toward the knife at her belt. He lowered the rifle a hair. "Name's Isaiah Granger, and you're on my land." Kenzie stood slowly, brushing blood from her palm. "I do not care whose land this is. My children were taken. I am following the trail." His eyes flicked over her dusty boots, empty canteen, torn dress. He raised a brow. "You are alone. They took them 2 days ago, a man with a scar on his neck and another with gold teeth. Rode north. I tracked them here." Isaiah's jaw tightened. He nodded toward a tree stump. "Sit. You are about to fall over." "I do not need rest." "You need your legs under you if you plan to keep chasing men like that." She hesitated, then dropped onto the stump. Her muscles screamed in relief. She looked up at him warily. "You know them, I might. Been tracking the same pair. They run whiskey through these hills. Took something from my neighbor last week. A girl." Kenzie's stomach twisted. "Did you find her, dead?" Her breath caught. Isaiah took a swig from his canteen and handed it to her. "That is not going to happen to your children. You do not know that. I know what men like that do, and I know what kind of tracks they leave behind. You want help or not?" She stared at him, bone-deep tired, and nodded. "Please." He nodded once briskly. "Then we ride, but you need a fresh horse. Mine will carry you. I can ride." "Not in that state." She opened her mouth, but he had already turned toward a small camp hidden in the trees. A second horse was tied there, saddled and ready. He tossed her the reins. "Drink. Eat something. We move in 10 minutes. Kenzie did not argue. They rode hard for hours, Isaiah leading the way, his eyes always scanning the ground. He barely spoke, but when he did, it was sharp, useful. "Tracks split up here. They want to confuse us." "They have done this before," she said. "Too many times. By dusk, they camped near a stream. Isaiah built the fire." Kenzie sat with her knees drawn up, staring into it. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, just heavy with what had not been said. He handed her a strip of dried meat. "You were married," her eyes flicked to him. "Was?" He nodded. "He is gone, left, years ago, thought being a mother was not exciting enough." Isaiah did not answer right away. Then, "Mine died, fever," a long pause. She looked at him, something softening in her chest. "I said I would never marry again," she said. He poked the fire. "I did not ask you to." She looked away. "I am just saying." Another pause, then his voice low and quiet. "Then just say my name instead." Her head snapped toward him. He met her eyes steady. "When you need strength, when you need someone beside you, just say my name, I will be there." Kenzie blinked hard, heart aching in a different way now. "Why are you helping me?" he shrugged. "Because you did not cry, you did not beg. You just rode in, ready to fight for your children. That is the kind of woman I would ride with." She swallowed. "I do not know how to trust that. You do not have to, just ride with me. One day at a time." She stared at him in the firelight, and for the first time in 2 days her shoulders dropped. The next morning they left at first light. They followed the tracks into the hills, through a narrow pass, and then found them. The men were camped in a ravine, their fire low. The children were tied near a tree, eyes wide, faces dirty but alive. Kenzie's breath hitched. Isaiah crouched beside her. "We circle around, you take the left, I will draw them right. When I fire, you run for the children." She nodded, heart pounding. He touched her wrist. "You are ready." "I was born ready." He gave her a ghost of a grin. "That is what I thought." He moved like a shadow, disappearing into the trees. Then gunfire. Kenzie ran. Bullets cracked through the branches, but she did not stop. She reached the children, sliced the rope with her knife, pulled them close. "Naomi," Nathan run to the tree line. "Go," they obeyed without question. One of the men turned, saw her too late. Isaiah tackled him from behind. A shot rang out, then silence. Kenzie turned, breathing hard. Isaiah stood, rifle smoking. The 2 men crumpled at his feet. It was over. She ran to her children, dropped to her knees, crushed them to her chest. Isaiah walked over slowly, eyes on them. Kenzie looked up at him, tears streaking her face. "You came. I told you. Just say my name." She stood, reached for his hand without thinking. He took it. They walked back to their horses as the sun rose behind them, golden light painting the mountains. Kenzie glanced at Isaiah, her fingers still wrapped around his. She had said she would never say "I do" again. But maybe she did not have to. Maybe just saying his name was enough. The town of Elk Haven sat in the crook of a narrow valley, tucked between 2 ridgelines like it didn't want to be found. The buildings were low and weather-worn, their signs faded, their windows clouded with dust. Kenzie hadn't planned to stop anywhere with people, not after what had happened. But Isaiah said the horses needed rest, and the children needed better than dried meat and cold creek water. They rode in with the sun easing toward its highest point, the wind carrying the scent of iron and sage. Naomi rode in front of Kenzie, one arm looped around her mother's waist, head resting lightly against her ribs. Nathan sat straight-backed behind Isaiah, quiet since the ravine. His eyes didn't miss anything. At the livery, Isaiah swung down first, then helped Nathan from the saddle with a steady hand. He didn't speak to the boy like he was fragile. That mattered more than Kenzie could say. "You got coin for feed and stalls?" she asked, dismounting stiffly. "I've got enough," Isaiah said, passing the reins to the stableman. "You'll need what you've got for supplies. I can pay my own way." He gave her a long look. "I never said you couldn't," she didn't answer. She didn't have to. They found a room above the mercantile. It was small, 1 bed and a cot, but it was clean and the window opened toward the hills. Kenzie left the children inside with a tin of biscuits and a pitcher of water, then stepped out onto the porch where Isaiah stood watching the street. He didn't turn when she joined him. "There's a church bell that rings even when no one's pulled the rope," he said. She glanced at the steeple. "You believe that?" "I've heard it once. It was raining." Kenzie folded her arms. "You believe in ghosts?" "I believe in what I see, that's all." A pair of boys ran past, kicking up dust. One of them wore a hat too big for his head. The other carried a stick like it was a rifle. For a moment, Kenzie felt her chest tighten. "They need something steadier," she said. "The children. They will have it." "I mean it, Isaiah. I can't have them sleeping in a different place every week." I can't be chasing trouble the rest of my life. What would steady look like to you? She hesitated. A school, a garden, something that stays put. He nodded once slowly. There's land near the creek, fertile, flat. I've been working it alone, but it could hold more. She looked up at him, surprised. You have a homestead, 60 acres. Cabin's half finished. I sleep in the barn when it rains. The wind stirred the edge of her skirt. Why haven't you finished it? Didn't seem worth it, just me. Kenzie didn't say anything right away. Her hands were raw, her back sore, but something in her eased behind them. The sound of small boots thudded down the stairs. Naomi's voice came through the open door. Mama, the biscuits are gone. Kenzie turned. We'll find something better than that. Isaiah stepped past her and crouched in front of the girl. You like blackberry pie? Naomi blinked. Yes. How about cold milk and a slice big as your hand? She nodded, eyes wide. He looked at Kenzie then. I know a place, if you come too. Kenzie gave a quiet laugh. You offering me pie, Granger? I'm offering you a moment to breathe. They walked through town together, the children skipping ahead. The bakery was tucked between the post office and a feed store, its windows lined with dusty jars of preserves. Inside, it smelled of lard crust and roasted apples. They sat at a wooden table by the window. Isaiah ordered for all of them, and when the pie came, Naomi gave a soft gasp. Nathan didn't say anything, but he ate every bite. Kenzie leaned back, watching the way Isaiah shifted his chair to let more light reach Naomi's plate. He didn't make a show of it. He just did it. Afterward, they stepped back into the street, and Isaiah looked toward the edge of town. There's a woman I know, widow, keeps 2 milk cows and a mule that don't listen. She might take you in for a few nights while the horses rest, safer than a room above a shop. Kenzie narrowed her eyes. You trust her? She's my aunt. That earned him a raised brow. You've got people, some, he said. Not many, but the ones I do, I don't leave behind. She held his gaze longer than she meant to. And what about you? What about me? Where do you sleep? I'll be near. She nodded slowly. All right. They gathered their things and walked out of town together, past the last fence line, into the stretch of land where the road turned to gravel and the trees grew taller. The house was small, whitewashed, with a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. A woman with silver-shot hair opened the door before they knocked. Isaiah Granger, you better not be bringing me another stray mule. No, ma'am, he said, touching the brim of his hat. Just someone who needs a place for a little while. The woman looked Kenzie over, then the children. Her eyes softened. I've got quilts and stew if that'll do. Kenzie's throat tightened. It will. Isaiah turned to leave, but Naomi caught his hand. Will you come back tomorrow? He crouched beside her again. I'll be just down the road. You knock if you need me. Kenzie watched him walk away, his back straight, his pace unhurried. That night, after the children were asleep, she stood on the porch with the stars pushing through the sky above. The sound of crickets filled the quiet. She could smell the stew pot cooling on the stove behind her. She whispered his name once, just to see how it tasted in the dark. Isaiah, and it felt like steadiness, like something that might stay. Kenzie woke to the sound of hens clucking under the window, and the scent of baking cornmeal drifting in from the kitchen. A soft light filtered through the lace curtain, golden and still. Naomi was curled beside her, thumb tucked under her cheek, while Nathan lay on the cot near the wall, one arm across his eyes like the sun had found him before he was ready. She sat up slowly, the quilt falling to her lap, and listened for a moment. No voices, just the creak of floorboards below and the sharp scrape of wood against cast iron. The widow, Isaiah's aunt, moved through the morning with the quiet skill of someone who'd done it all for years. Kenzie dressed quickly and stepped onto the porch with her boots in hand, the boards cool under her feet. The valley stretched wide before her, a low mist still clinging to the ground. She could see the distant line of cottonwoods where the creek bent west. Somewhere beyond that, Isaiah was working. She found him there just after midday, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hat low against the sun. He was mending a fence rail with a hammer and a steady rhythm, the kind of work that asked nothing but time and patience. She stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed over her waist, until he looked up. "You walk all the way out here?" he asked, setting the hammer down. "Didn't feel that far." "You come to check my workmanship." She stepped closer. "I came because I'm not sure what comes next." He leaned against the post, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "You mean for you and the children?" She nodded. "I've always gone where I had to. Wagon to wagon, job to job, never lingered." Isaiah picked up a small tin from the ground and opened it, revealing a stub of pencil and a folded sheet of paper. "You ever think about putting roots down?" "I've thought about it, but thinking and doing are different things." He held the paper out to her. "This is the deed to my land. I filed it 4 years ago, kept it folded like that ever since." She didn't take it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I've got space. A good well. Room for more than a barn and a stove. What I don't have is someone to make it feel like a place worth staying." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know what I've done, who I've been. I've had to lie, steal food, sleep in strangers' sheds. I've made choices for my children that I can't explain away with a clean conscience." Isaiah didn't flinch. "You kept them alive. That's not something to be ashamed of. I've never had someone offer me anything without wanting something in return." He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "How about this? We build it together. The house, the life. No promises beyond each day." "You don't owe me a thing." Kenzie stared at him, the wind tugging at her hair. "You're asking me to stay." "I'm asking you to let yourself rest." She looked toward the creek, toward the hills beyond it, and for the first time in years she didn't feel like running. By early evening, they returned to the widow's house. Naomi was shelling peas on the porch steps, and Nathan was sitting beside her, showing her how to fold paper into birds. Kenzie watched them a long moment before stepping inside. The widow was stirring something thick in a cast iron pot. She glanced over her shoulder. "You find what you were looking for?" Kenzie leaned against the doorframe. "I think I found something I didn't know I needed." That night, Isaiah returned with a sack of seed, 2 carved spoons, and a bundle of lumber strapped to his mule. He handed the spoons to the children and set the rest down without comment. Kenzie walked him to the edge of the yard. "You didn't have to bring all that. Didn't do it for you." She raised a brow. "I did it for the house," he said. "That we're going to build." She hesitated. "If I say yes to this, it won't be because I need saving." He nodded. "I wouldn't want it any other way. And I still can't say those words." "You don't need to," he said, voice low. "Just say my name when it matters. That'll be enough." She stepped closer, the air between them quiet and sure. "Isaiah." He didn't move. She said it again, softer now. "Isaiah." He reached for her hand, palm rough, fingers warm. "I'm here." And this time she didn't pull away. The first frost came early that year, resting like lace over the fields before the leaves had fully turned. Isaiah's land, once a spread of wild grass and stubborn sage, now bore the shape of something lived in rows of turned earth. A fence that held, smoke rising from a chimney that hadn't stood there 6 weeks ago. Kenzie stood at the edge of the garden bed, a hoe balanced in her hand, watching the sky lighten behind the distant ridge. Naomi's shawl hung from a post nearby, forgotten in yesterday's rush to bring in the last of the squash. A pair of crows quarreled in the cottonwood near the well, their wings sharp against the morning hush. Inside the cabin, Nathan was reading aloud to his sister, his voice low and careful. They'd taken to the new rhythm faster than she had school lessons at the table. chores before supper, evenings spent with Isaiah's aunt, who'd moved into the smaller house he'd built beside the barn. The woman had never spoken of her own children, but she folded Naomi's dresses with the same care she used for flour sacks, and she taught Nathan to mend his own socks without fuss. Kenzie wiped her hands on her apron and stepped inside. The warmth hit her cheeks, the scent of yeast and wood smoke settling deep. Isaiah was at the table, tying a leather strap around a bundle of letters. "You're going into town?" she asked, hanging her bonnet beside the door. "Post offices expecting these. And the mill's holding a grindstone I paid for last spring." She poured herself coffee, dark and bitter. "You want company?" He looked up, his jaw dark with stubble. "You sure you want to leave the garden to whatever those birds are planning?" She raised an eyebrow. "I won't be gone long." Isaiah stood and reached for his coat. "Nathan's been asking when you'll let him try the plow. He's not ready. He's nearly your height. He's also got Naomi's sense of direction." Isaiah chuckled quietly, then pulled the door open. "We'll be back by sundown." The ride into Elk Haven was quiet, the road dusted with fallen aspen leaves. Kenzie watched the hills shift with the sun, the gold turning to copper, the air sharpening with the promise of winter. She hadn't left the homestead in weeks, not since the last beam had gone into the roof and Isaiah had stood back, arms folded to say, "Looks like it'll hold." At the mercantile, Isaiah handed off the letters, then disappeared into the back to speak with the mill hand. Kenzie browsed the shelves, fingers brushing over jars of dried beans and buttons strung with twine. She paused at a display of paper fans, then moved on. A voice caught her attention. "Kenzie Trailer," she turned. A man with a faded coat and a limp stood near the door, a hat crushed in his hands. His face was older, thinner, but she knew that mouth, that voice. "Samuel," she said, her voice flat. He nodded. "Didn't expect to see you here. I live nearby. You look well." She didn't answer. Samuel cleared his throat. "I heard what happened, the children. I'm glad they're safe." She stayed silent. "I came through Montana looking for work. I heard you'd," he shifted. "I never meant to leave things like I did." "You left because you wanted to," she said. "You don't get to rewrite that." He blinked. "I thought maybe there's nothing left to think," she said. "Not anymore." Isaiah stepped out just then, grindstone slung under one arm. He looked between them and said nothing. Kenzie turned to him, her spine straight. "We're done here," she said. They rode home under a pale sky, the silence between them different this time. She didn't speak until the cabin was in view, the smoke rising steady, the fence lines catching the last of the light. "That man in town," she said. "I figured who he was," Isaiah replied. "I didn't expect to ever see him again." Isaiah slowed his horse. "You don't owe me anything, Kenzie, not explanations, not history." She looked at him. "I didn't want him to see what I've built now and think he had any part in it." He didn't. She nodded, her grip tightening on the reins. "I know." They dismounted near the barn. Naomi came running, apron flapping, cheeks red from the wind. "You're late," she scolded. "Supper's almost burned." Kenzie laughed, the sound surprising her. Isaiah reached for the sack and followed them inside. Later, after the children were asleep and the fire had burned low, Kenzie stepped out onto the porch. Isaiah was already there, sharpening a blade slowly with the new grindstone. She leaned against the post. "I didn't expect today to feel like a reckoning." Isaiah didn't look up. "Most reckonings don't come when you're ready." She watched his hands move, steady and certain. "I've been thinking," she said. Dangerous habit. She ignored the tease. "This life we're building, it's not just about surviving anymore. It's about choosing what stays." He set the blade down. "And what stays?" She turned to face him fully. "You, this place, the way Naomi laughs when she's hanging laundry, the way Nathan reads aloud every night like it's his duty." Isaiah stood. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready for, Kenzie." "I know," she said. "But I'm not afraid of what I feel." He stepped closer, his face lit by the glow of the lantern inside. "Then what do you feel?" She reached for his hand, fingers lacing with his. "I feel like I've already said yes, just not with words." Isaiah's voice was quiet. "And if I asked again?" Kenzie smiled, the lines at the corners of her eyes soft. "Then I'd still say your name, because that's the only promise I've ever meant." He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "That's all I've ever needed." November brought hard wind and early snow. It fell quiet and steady one morning, covering the roof of the cabin in a soft, white hush. Naomi pressed her nose to the window pane while Nathan tried to catch flakes on his palm through the open door before Kenzie pulled him back in. "Boots off," she said, brushing snow from his shoulders. "I'm not scrubbing melted tracks again." Isaiah was splitting kindling near the barn, his coat dusted with frost. He didn't look up until Kenzie stepped outside with his gloves in hand. "You'll freeze your fingers off." He took them without argument. "Ground's already hard. We'll need more hay if this keeps up. We've got enough for the animals through December. I'm thinking ahead." Kenzie crossed her arms. "I know that look." "What look?" "The one that says you've been up since before the rooster, wondering if the roof'll hold under heavy snow." Isaiah leaned the axe against the stump. "It's the first winter with more than just me under it." She stepped closer. "Then we'll patch what needs patching. Together." He brushed snow from her sleeve. "You always this stubborn." "I'm just getting started." By late afternoon, the clouds had cleared and the sun shone sharp against the snowdrifts. Isaiah hitched the sleigh for the first time, and the children clambered in with blankets and wide eyes. Kenzie climbed up beside him, the hem of her wool skirt tucked under her boots. They followed the creek east, its banks rimmed with ice, until they reached the edge of a meadow where the trees opened wide. The horses slowed as Isaiah pulled the reins and let them rest. Nathan stood in the sleigh, pointing. "There's deer tracks." Kenzie nodded. "They come down from the ridge when snow's this thick. You'll see more come dusk." Isaiah reached under the seat and handed the boy a small pouch. "Try to track how many pass through. Chalk's inside." Nathan looked up. "You trust me with it?" Isaiah met his eyes. "You know how to pay attention. That's all it takes." Naomi leaned against Kenzie's side. "Can we stay here a little longer?" Isaiah looked to Kenzie, then back at the girl. "As long as you like." That evening, back at the homestead, the four of them shared cornbread and roasted root vegetables while the fire popped and cracked. Isaiah's aunt carved a wooden whistle for Naomi, her fingers sure and practiced. Nathan wrote in a small ledger, noting the tracks he'd found, his writing slow but careful. When the children were asleep, Kenzie and Isaiah stepped outside. The sky was clear, stars scattered like spilled grain. Their breath came out in puffs, and the snow creaked faintly beneath their boots. "I keep thinking," Isaiah said, "how I used to come out here and hear nothing but wind and my own thoughts." Kenzie tilted her head back, watching the stars. Now I hear Naomi humming, Nathan asking questions I don't always have answers for. You telling me things I didn't know I needed to hear." She reached for his hand. "I think about what would have happened if I hadn't crossed that ridge. I would have found you," he said. "Somewhere, somehow." She turned to him, her voice soft. "I want to make this permanent. Not just the roof, the land, us." He brushed a curl from her cheek. "I already built this place for you before I knew your name." Kenzie smiled, tears rising without warning. "Say it again." Isaiah stepped closer, his palm warm against her jaw. "This is your home and mine." "I'm yours, Kenzie." She leaned into him, their foreheads touching. "Then marry me." His breath caught. "You sure?" "I've never been more certain." Isaiah nodded, voice thick. "Tomorrow we'll ask the preacher to ride out." I don't want to wait. Neither do I. They kissed beneath the stars, snow falling again, slower this time, as if the world was settling into place. The preacher came 2 days later, bundled in a fur-lined coat and carrying a worn Bible. They stood beneath the cottonwood near the creek, Naomi holding wild berries in a bowl, Nathan standing tall with Isaiah's hat perched solemnly on his head. Kenzie wore a dress stitched by Isaiah's aunt, the hem trimmed in blue thread. Isaiah had shaved for the first time in weeks, and his hands didn't shake when he took hers. "I have nothing fancy to say," he told her. "Only that you're the first thing I ever wanted more than solitude." Kenzie's voice didn't waver. "And you're the first man I've ever looked at and seen a future instead of an escape." Naomi clapped when they kissed. Nathan looked away, but his mouth twitched like he couldn't quite hide his pride. That night, Isaiah added another log to the fire and pulled Kenzie close on the settee he'd built with his own hands. The cabin was quiet except for the wind outside and the soft creak of the rocking chair where Naomi had fallen asleep beside her aunt. Kenzie rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think peace was something you found at the end of the road. Now I know it's something you build day by day." Isaiah kissed her temple. "We'll keep building," and they did. The winter passed with stories by the hearth and days spent mending what needed mending. Isaiah taught Nathan how to set traps near the ridge, and Kenzie showed Naomi how to press flowers between the pages of her reader. The ground thawed in March, and by April the garden rows were green with new shoots. By summer, the cabin had a porch swing and the barn held a new calf. Isaiah carved a second bed frame for Nathan, and Kenzie planted a row of sunflowers along the fence line. They woke each morning beside each other, hands linked beneath the quilt, and never once did Kenzie speak of leaving. She never had to say the words. The way she looked at him said enough. And Isaiah, every day, treated her not as a woman rescued, but as the partner she was equal in work, in will, in heart. Their love didn't burn fast. It held steady like the land beneath their feet, and it never wavered. Not once.